Why did the United States drop atomic bombs on Japan? This single question has sparked debate for nearly 80 years. Was it a military necessity to end World War II, or was it something more complex? Today, we are going to unpack the layers of this monumental decision, looking at it from all angles to understand what truly happened in August 1945. By the summer of 1945, the war in Europe was over, but the conflict in the Pacific raged on. The United States and its allies were closing in on Japan, but the fighting was getting more brutal, not less. The battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa were horrifying previews of what an invasion of the Japanese mainland would look like. Let's look at the numbers. On Iwo Jima, a tiny volcanic island, nearly 7,000 US Marines were killed and 20,000 wounded. On Okinawa, the casualties were even higher. Over 12,000 American lives lost and more than 100,000 Japanese soldiers and Okinawan civilians dead. The Japanese military's fight to the last man philosophy was not just a slogan, it was a brutal reality. Soldiers were using kamikaze tactics, and civilians were being told to prepare for a final, desperate battle on the home islands. Faced with these figures, US military planners began to work on Operation Downfall, the code name for the planned invasion of Japan. The predictions were grim. They estimated that an invasion could result in anywhere from 500,000 to over 1 million American casualties. Japanese casualties, both military and civilian, were expected to be in the millions. The war, they believed, could drag on for another year, maybe even longer. This is the context in which the atomic bomb enters the story. The Manhattan Project, a top-secret US program, had been racing to develop this new weapon for years. On July 16, 1945, the Trinity test in the New Mexico desert was a success. Suddenly, President Harry Truman had a new, terrifying option. The official reason given for using the bombs was straightforward: to save lives by forcing a quick surrender and avoiding a bloody invasion. Truman and his advisors argued that using the bomb, as devastating as it was, would ultimately result in fewer deaths on both sides compared to a full-scale invasion. From this perspective, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were a terrible but necessary choice to end a terrible war. It was a utilitarian calculation, the lesser of two evils. After the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th, Japan's leadership was stunned, but they didn't surrender immediately. The military hardliners still believed they could fight on. It's important to remember the internal power struggle happening in Tokyo. The Supreme Council for the direction of the war was split. Some wanted to find a way to end the war, but others were determined to continue fighting, hoping for a final decisive battle that would secure better surrender terms. Then, on August 9th, two things happened. The Soviet Union, which had been neutral in the Pacific War, declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria, a Japanese-controlled territory in China. This was a massive blow. The Japanese had hoped the Soviets might mediate a peace deal. Now, they were facing a new enemy on a new front. Just hours later, the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. This combination of the Soviet invasion and the second bombing finally broke the deadlock. Emperor Hirohito, in an unprecedented move, personally intervened and instructed his government to accept the Allied surrender terms, with the one condition that the emperor's position be preserved. On August 15th, Japan announced its surrender, and World War II was officially over. So, was it really just about saving lives? This is where the story gets more complicated. Some historians argue that there were other major factors at play. One of the most prominent is the geopolitical chess game with the Soviet Union. The Cold War was already beginning to simmer. By 1945, the US and the Soviet Union were allies in name only. They were quickly becoming rivals for post-war influence. According to this view, dropping the atomic bombs wasn't just about Japan, it was also a message to Joseph Stalin. It was a demonstration of America's new, unmatched power. By ending the war quickly, the US could limit Soviet expansion in Asia and establish itself as the dominant global superpower. Some have called this atomic diplomacy, using the bomb as a political tool. The timing of the bombs, just before the Soviets could make significant gains in the region, supports this theory. It showed the world, and especially Moscow, that the United States held the ultimate weapon. There's also the question of whether Japan was already on the verge of surrender. Some evidence suggests that Japanese leaders were secretly trying to find a way out of the war through diplomatic backchannels. The US had been firebombing Japanese cities for months, destroying their industrial capacity and killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. The naval blockade was strangling the country, cutting off food and supplies. Japan was economically and militarily exhausted. Critics of the bombing argue that Japan would have surrendered soon anyway, perhaps within a few weeks or months, without the use of atomic weapons. They believe the combination of the conventional bombing campaign, the naval blockade, and the imminent Soviet invasion would have been enough to force a surrender. From this viewpoint, dropping the bombs was not only unnecessary but a profound moral failure. Furthermore, some question the choice of targets. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were cities with significant military and industrial importance, but they were also home to hundreds of thousands of civilians. The decision to use a weapon that couldn't distinguish between a soldier and a child raises deep ethical questions that continue to be debated. Was the intentional targeting of civilian populations a war crime? High-ranking military figures at the time, including future President Dwight D. Eisenhower and Admiral William Lee, later expressed their belief that the use of the bomb was not necessary from a purely military standpoint. So, we have three main arguments. The first is that the bombs were a military necessity to prevent a catastrophic invasion and save lives. The second is that they were a political tool, a power play aimed at the Soviet Union to shape the post-war world. And the third is that they were an unnecessary and immoral act against a nation that was already defeated and on the brink of surrender. The truth is likely not one single answer, but a combination of all these factors. President Truman and his advisors were operating under immense pressure, with imperfect information, in the final, chaotic days of the deadliest war in human history. Their decision was almost certainly influenced by a mix of military strategy, political calculation, and perhaps a desire for retribution for Pearl Harbor. Today, we can look back with the benefit of hindsight, but it's crucial to understand the context of 1945. The world was weary of war, and the desire to end it was overwhelming. The atomic bomb represented a shortcut, a definitive end to the bloodshed, but it came at an unimaginable human cost. The legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is not just a historical debate. It ushered in the nuclear age and the constant threat of atomic warfare that defined the Cold War. It forced humanity to confront its own capacity for self-destruction. The stories of the survivors, the hibakusha, are powerful reminders of the horrific reality of nuclear weapons. So, why were the bombs dropped? To save American lives, to intimidate the Soviets, to force a quick surrender, to justify the massive cost of the Manhattan Project. The answer isn't simple, and it's not meant to be. It's one of those historical moments where military necessity, political ambition, and moral questions collide in a way that continues to challenge our understanding of war and peace. What do you think? Was it a necessary evil or a tragic mistake? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is a complex topic, and it's important to discuss it respectfully.